If Boris Johnson is in trouble over Partygate, and by the way, I think he'll be in rather more trouble over Partygate when the next fines come, as they are absolutely bound to. I'd be surprised if he doesn't get 2, 3 or 4 more fines. But the biggest problem the government faces, the biggest problem actually millions of folk in this country face, is rapidly rising energy bills. We talked about this yesterday. We looked at the testimony put before the parliamentary committee by the big energy bosses, already inundated with thousands of phone calls from decent customers saying, how on earth are we going to pay these bills? And I talked about what the government can actually do. Yes, the 5% VAT on our energy bills, which of course was a Brexit promise, could be removed. But the big one is the 25% surcharge on our electricity bills, which goes to renewable and social obligations. And I want to fight, I want to lobby, I want to campaign to get this removed. It would give great relief to those who are genuinely struggling here. Well, joining me is somebody who was a member of Parliament in the 1990s and a former chief executive of Energy UK. It's Angela Knight. Angela, good evening.
Good evening.
So my question to you is not so much whether we should perhaps, reconsider this 25% on the electricity bills. My question to you is, how do we get together a campaign of people to make the government shift its position?
And I think to get a campaign, you need to be absolutely clear what the campaign is about, Nigel.
Yep.
Is it about abandoning the whole going green agenda, or is it about the cost that individuals and companies are paying for in the levy on the bill? Because if it's abandon the green agenda, then that's one campaign. But I don't think that that's the right one, because in amongst all this green levy and all this, all this green levy and policy piece, there's also what we do about the next generation of electricity. And you and I have talked about this before. How do we make our whole system more self-sufficient? What do we do about getting on with building small nuclear and so forth? So in effect, I think that the way that I would look at it is not removing the green agenda and the self-sufficiency agenda and the insulation agenda, but I think very much, as you say, who pays, how much, and for what? If we are going to... Sorry.
No, I mean, you make the point there. You make the point there. I did make this point last night, that very, very few commentators, when they talk about these issues and talk about these costs, of course, bring in business. And we have made so many sections of heavy engineering, of refining, of aluminium production. We've made so many of our manufacturing companies simply close down and relocate that I'm absolutely with you. We mustn't forget business. But I don't think it's being anti the green agenda to say we shouldn't have, after decades of work, we shouldn't have to go on subsidising these things.
Now, that's a very good point. I do question whether we need to subsidise wind farms now to the way that we did in the past, number one. I do think that there's a case for putting a few more things on general taxation. And I do think that there's a case for bringing into play more private money when one is talking about building new generators and smaller generators and so on. And if I was in government, I mean, we all say this, if I was in government, what government needs to do is just stand back for a moment and have a think through what it is doing, what is the best way of doing it, how to finance things, what is reasonable for individuals and for business to pay, and indeed, should we actually just take a rain check on some of these levies for a period of 1 or 2 years? Because I don't think, whilst it's absolutely right, let's go and look at that green levy piece, but also on the bill now is paying for failed suppliers. Now, that's up at 60, 70, 80 pounds already. And there's a whole piece in there about networks, because, of course, you've got to get your gas and your electricity to us and to business. But a lot of that sits around the fact that we have to move things, move the transmission in order to connect the new wind farms in.
Yeah.
So there is something there that is more holistic I think government needs to think about it. And I also think they need to be brave. It may well be that they come back, with a plan which says, yes, Nigel Farage, you're earning a decent amount of money as a presenter. You are going to have to pay more for your energy bill. But those people down the road who are really up to the wire, we're actually going to give them much more help. So there's a mixture of things here. But just carrying on, adding stuff on the bill, which we all pay, is regressive. And as you rightly point out, it's now a very real problem. And it is just part of this piece called energy, where the thinking needs to be done again. It's not in the right place at all.
Well, 25% on the electricity bill for renewable and social obligations, another 5% on the bill for VAT. And as you pointed out, actually, because of the difficulty of moving this power around the United Kingdom, other added costs. So we are looking into the 30% that are being added onto people's bills for all of this. One last thought. I know there are some businesses that are benefiting hugely from all of this, but I don't, even though I've spoken to refiners, I've spoken to metal bashers, I've spoken to so many people over the, and I worked in the metals industry, so I know a lot of these people. I've spoken to so many individual businesses who've been massively disadvantaged compared to France and Germany and especially America, let alone India and China. There's no concerted voice of business, is there, saying, for goodness sake, help us to become competitive, help us to create jobs, and that actually, if you export steel making from Redcar to India, there's no benefit for global CO2 either. Where are the voices? Where's the lobby?
I have been wondering that as well. I think you're quite right, because, I was going to chip in on you a moment ago. Most businesses have got a problem. A few haven't, but most have. And the competitiveness of the UK is vitally important. And, of course, I'm one for bringing back more jobs and more industry into the UK, not sending more of it out worldwide. Your initial question to me was, how do we get a lobby going? Well, the first thing that you need with a good lobby is to have a plan of what you want the people you're lobbying to do, and that plan has got to be operational, it's got to be sensible, and it's got to be something that the government can actually implement. Because we're all very good at saying, I don't want that, I don't want to pay for that, why did you do this, why don't you do that? It unfortunately isn't that easy. I wish it was. If it was easy, it would be done. So it is presenting a sensible alternative route, which may have, taking a rain check for a couple of years on certain agendas. And it's presenting that sensible route, which they can do, and marshalling up industry as well, which is the way that you create a good lobby. So carry on talking about it, and so will I.
Very good indeed. Angela, you can chip in any time. Thank you very much indeed for joining me
Thank you.
this evening. Well, there's clearly more work to be done, and I think she put it rather well.